What's up, guys? Today we are talking about insight versus skill. So this topic popped up a couple of months ago for me when we had friends visiting. They were in town going to a workshop from a very well-known mind-body coach from the United States, and we're in Vietnam here. And I happen to know a bit about the background of the coach. She's a phenomenal instructor with decades and decades of experience in Aikido and somatic work. So the question that I had for the people that were staying with us was, what's your motivation for taking this course? It was a 3-day course. And are you motivated by insight or by skill? And the reason that I asked this question is because there is a lot of stuff that we tend to go after and seek out in life, especially in the personal development domain. And I don't think we really categorize things along those lines. And I think it's really critical that we do so. So the couple that were staying with us are both leaders in their own domains and, well-versed in a variety of personal development methods and models. And so they knew exactly what they were after, which was, to walk away with a few insights. And this is perfectly valid and all well and good, and I think that all of us need to seek out information and experiences that add insight and more depth to our lives. But the question that I was personally left with is, if this is an insight that stems from decades of experience, will it transfer? So let me give you guys an example. Right? You just watched a short clip of constructing a dummy for knife throwing. Don't smoke, guys. It is bad for your health, unless it's a good cigar. Knives. So what do knives have to do with this whole dilemma and, personal development in general? Now, there are 2 schools of knife throwing, maybe more. I'm aware of 2 particular ones, but there are the spinning schools and the non-spinning schools of knife throwing. The primary difference being, obviously, in one case, the knife is spinning through air, and in the other case, boom, it's a direct stick. Now, classically, traditionally, you would see people hold the knife generally by the tip, possibly by the other end, depending on distance. But the idea is that every 3 feet, this rotates a half a turn. So, this is the predominant school of knife throwing, which is why you find guys that practice this have markers on the ground and generally stand a fixed distance from the target and then start to vary those distances. Why? Because you got to do the math every time you want to throw the knife. Now, again, don't knife people, don't throw knives. It's not about that. But it's about whether or not this is a robust model for learning any skill, for learning to throw a knife, for example. The other school of knife throwing, which I find far more appealing, is the no-spin school. The value out of this school is that you don't got to do math, which is good for me because it ain't my forte, right? But the way that that technique works is a little bit different, and it's more based on sensitivity and the way that the knife is released that allows, or rather removes, the spin. Okay, so as you throw the knife, which is what I did in the video, you're actually using the touch and the feel of the fingertip to control that spin so that it starts to stretch out and sticks in the target. It's harder to learn. It's harder to learn, but we have to ask ourselves, if we were to ever actually have to throw a knife, which one of these might hold up better? Now, the difference with the second one is I can adjust the feel in action, in flight, right? With the other one, if my math is off, if I misjudge the distance, or if I'm under pressure and feel nervous about releasing, it's quite possible I might overcommit, undercommit, add too much spin, or misjudge the distance, right? There's a lot that could go wrong here. But we only start to think about these differences or know these differences when we have to apply the skill under pressure. Now, I'm not out there sticking people with knives and throwing these things, but I've got a lot of experience in martial arts, and I understand this dynamic at play with a wide variety of other skills and applications, and they do transfer. So the case I'm trying to make here for all of us is, how are we personally approaching our growth models, our personal development methods, anything that we are using to try to enhance our minds and our bodies over time? Are we approaching them with the mindset that I'm going to try this for a bit, I'm going to basically get it, and then, I've got it thereafter, right? This is the idea, that the mentality of a black belt who gets their black belt and then stops training. When people have been in the game for a while, know that the black belt isn't the end, that's the beginning of the journey. That's when you know somebody is serious about training, right? Which is why you find a lot of coaches and instructors tend to reserve a lot of some of the deeper elements of training just to wait through people to get through that simple filter of dedication. Let me just give one more example along the same lines. So I might be teaching a technique in a martial arts class, right? And this is super common. Every teacher can relate, and if you've been a student of anything, you can probably relate to it on the other side. We'll talk about one technique. I'll say, okay, class, go to work. After about 3 to 5 minutes, each person may have done it 10 to 15 times, and then you'll start to notice one group after the other starts to chat, or they start to stop practicing the technique, or they start to look over for more guidance, but no questions necessarily, and the repetitions start to drop off. And they say, okay, well, we got it. What next? To which my only thought, not usually my response, but my only thought is, well, you got to do this 1,000 more times, right? Or 10,000 more times. This isn't about you doing something. Especially in the domain of self-defense and combat, we're dealing with one of the most complex domains with an infinite number of variables. And people will practice a technique 10 times and say, oh, okay, what next? And this is where things start to break down. So I don't want to isolate this to the martial arts domain, because it isn't. This is how we approach pretty much any skill in life, and I think that it's a great discussion point and a reflection point. So I want to ask you guys, maybe you can leave a note, tell me what you think about this particular topic in the comments below. But how do you feel about those differences? And where do you feel that line is between the two? How often should we pursue insights that maybe broaden our horizons, expand our mind, expand our awareness, and allow us to have more perspective in life, versus how do we approach those things that probably require a bit more skill to be able to be practical or meaningful, right? And so where's that line? How do we know the difference between those things, where we can do them a few times and walk away with the insight, and the insight is in fact what matters, right? So we might take an executive of a company, expose him to an hour of martial arts, and he may walk away with an insight from that martial arts class about how to perform better under pressure within his own domain. And that makes a lot of sense. But if the insight is actually something that requires a lot of skill and practice and repetition so that you can execute it under pressure, and that insight might be in fact how you approach change, or how you approach pressure, or how you actually regulate your mind and your body under pressure. Now, these are things that we can really readily acquire an insight about, but whether or not we can do it when it matters is a whole different question. And so for me, this comes down to two fundamental questions. One, are we dealing with a robust model in the first place? Are we dealing with a model that might break down under pressure, or one that, if we execute it correctly, is robust enough to serve us well even under pressure? That's the first question. The second one being, does this require skill, or is the insight alone enough? So guys, that is the end for my little rant for today. Hopefully it did add a little bit of insight, probably not skill just yet. But I've neglected this channel for a while, and it's time for me to take it a little bit more seriously. For those of you that have stuck around over the years and have, appreciated some of my content and given me feedback, thank you for sticking around. I hope we can build something further together. And yeah, if this is useful to you and you'd like to see more, like, subscribe, and be weightless. Catch you next time.